go. Neiman, come over here and try these. It's donut with japchae on the inside. So today we are going to do street food, Korean street food. We're going to start a series on Korean street food. So what is Korean street food? Some people call Korean street food the very best food in Korea. Korean street food, as the name suggests, is food that's traditionally sold by street vendors. So dating all the way back to the Joseon dynasty, Korean street food was traditionally sold in lower income neighborhoods. And this of course took on greater significance during and after the Korean War, when South Korea saw a flood of refugees coming from North Korea. As you may or may not know, that of course included my grandparents and my mom and my dad. So these refugees from North Korea, they had no money, they had nowhere to go, they had no homes, they had no jobs, and of course, they had no food. So cheap street food was actually a luxury item for them. So it's no wonder that Korean street food today is really a testament to Korean resilience and survival. Speaking of my parents, as I mentioned, both of them were born in what is now known as North Korea. Specifically, my father was born there and he fled with my grandmother, his mother, into South Korea shortly after World War II. One of his favorite foods of all times is a Korean street food. It's called Hotteok, which is a fried, stuffed Korean pancake. Now, why did he love Hotteok so much? Well, my father, when growing up, he barely had enough food to eat, and he often didn't have enough clothes to keep him warm during the winter. When you make Hotteok, the street vendor is literally going to take it right out of that frying oil, and then they're going to wrap it in some Korean newspaper, and they're going to give it to you just like that, really, really hot out of that oil. So my father would often warm his bare hands in the wintertime with that still hot fried dough in between his hands. And that's what he remembers about his favorite moments in his childhood. So today, we are going to make Hotteok. So most of the time when people hear the word Hotteok, or when they have it in Korea, including the kind that my father had, it's a sweet dish. It's usually stuffed with some kind of sweet glaze, with sweet nuts, or even with sweet red bean paste. But you know what's all the rage in Korea right now is Hotteok that's stuffed with something savory. In particular, stuffed with Korean glass noodles, or japchae. If you want a recipe for japchae, you can check out this video. I did one a couple of weeks ago. We're gonna do a sort of take on japchae that's a little bit simpler so that we can stuff our pancakes with them. And that's what we're gonna do today. And I'm really, really excited to get into this very, very popular Korean street food. All right, let's go. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna start with the dough. And the reason for that is it's going to take at least an hour and a half for the dough to proof. And by proof, what we mean is for it to rise enough in order to create a little bit of gluten and some air pockets in our dough. So it's a very, very simple recipe. We're gonna start by proofing our yeast, and that means we're gonna take the liquid that we want our yeast to thrive in, and that's gonna be 1 1/4 cup of about warm milk. You want it not hot enough where you can't touch it, but you also don't want it like room temperature. You want it somewhere in between. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm going to add our yeast to this. I've got here about 2 teaspoons of yeast. We've got to feed our yeast, right? Yeast loves to eat sugar. So we're gonna add about a tablespoon of organic sugar. We're just gonna give this a mix. So now we are going to mix together the dry ingredients for the rest of our dough. And that's gonna start with 2 cups of all-purpose flour. For those of you who like to weigh your dry ingredients, that would be 280 grams of all-purpose flour. I'm also gonna add just a little bit of sweet white rice flour. A very popular brand of this is Mochiko. You can use that, but you do wanna use sweet white rice flour. You don't wanna just buy white rice flour. That's not gonna work here. I'm gonna add about 1/2 cup of that here as well. We're gonna add about a teaspoon of salt to this. And then finally, we're gonna add a tablespoon of vegetable oil. I wanna show you what our milk looks like. it's all gnarly and kind of like frothy, and that's what you want to go for. Then you know that your yeast is alive, which is very important. We're going to incorporate the yeast mixture into our dry ingredients now. And I'm just going to gently stir everything together. And what this is going to do is it's going to form a very scraggly, sticky, ugly dough. So it looks like all of our flour has been incorporated, and you can see we've got a very sticky dough here. And what I'm going to do is I am going to attempt to knead this with my hands. And in order to guard against the stickiness, I am going to lightly dust my hands with some flour, okay? Just a little bit here. It is going to be very sticky. Don't worry about that for now. Just want to give a little bit of work to this dough so that we encourage that gluten to start forming. We don't need a lot of gluten for this recipe. We're not making like a brioche or anything like that, but we do want some. Okay, so I gave it a good knead for about, I would say, 3 or 4 minutes. We don't need that much. You can see my hands look like a disaster. I'm gonna wash my hands. We're gonna cover this with a towel or with some plastic wrap. We're gonna set it aside somewhere pretty warm, I would say in the 70 to 78 degree range for about 1 hour until it's doubled in size, okay? All right, so now that we have our dough proofing in a nice cozy little spot, what we're going to do is work on the stuffing. And it actually begins with these glass noodles. So you may have heard of them. These are the sweet potato vermicelli that is used to make a very, very popular Korean dish called japchae. So we're actually going to stuff our Korean fried pancakes with japchae. But unlike traditional japchae, we're not going to keep the noodles very long, and we're not going to add all the different colored vegetables that we typically see. This is going to be sort of like a fast and dirty kind of japchae, and then we're also going to chop it up into little bits because otherwise it'll be very difficult for us to wrap the dough around our japchae to make sure that our pockets are actually stuffed with anything. We're actually going to prep the noodles by soaking them in a little bit of warm tap water. I've discovered that as I get older, I am unable to open anything without scissors. Okay. So I've got here just like a very large pan. I like boiling my water for noodles in pans because then I don't need to use this much in order to get all of the noodles submerged in the water. I'm just gonna do this. Oop, I'm gonna take out this. So you can see now that it's just going to soak a little bit in that warm water, and that's going to get it really nice and bendy before we actually boil and fully cook them. It'll also cut down significantly on the cook time. Now, what are we going to actually put into our down and dirty japchae here? Well, I've got here some carrots, and I thought we could also add a couple of shiitake mushrooms. I thought we could add some spinach, as well as some bell peppers. Those aren't all of the ingredients that I would necessarily put into my japchae. They're just some of them, and like I said, we don't need a full-blown japchae here. So we've finally finished up chopping up all of our ingredients. Let's see what we got here. We got a little bit of spinach, green bell pepper, red bell pepper, some carrot. We have here somewhere hiding underneath all this, some shiitake mushrooms. We also have just some diced onion. whatever you got lying around your house. If you have, you know, kale, or if you had some red onion or some shallot, if you want to add some garlic to this, that would be great. If you don't have shiitake mushrooms, but cremini mushrooms, those would be great too. This is one of those things where basically any vegetable is going to go wonderful with these glass noodles. We're just going to add a little bit of oil. I'm going to use extra virgin olive oil, but of course you can use whatever vegetable neutral oil you want. I'm just going to add a tablespoon, not too much. To this, I'm also going to add a teaspoon of toasted sesame oil, and that's really for flavor. Don't need a lot, so just 1 teaspoon will do. Again, the reason we do both of those instead of just sesame oil is, number 1, sesame oil is very, very strong. A little goes a long way. And number 2, sesame oil has a lower burn point, so it's much harder to cook with without it getting bitter. That's why we mix it with the extra virgin olive oil to help make sure that the sesame oil doesn't burn. So to this, I'm just gonna dump my big old bowl of chopped up veggies. I'm gonna add just a pinch of salt, help draw out some of the flavors, as well as some cracked black pepper. It already smells so good in here. So we stir-fried those veggies for less than 2 minutes. That's really all we need, because remember, they're also going to be cooking when they're inside of the stuffed pancake, so we don't need to cook the crap out of them right now, all right? So we're going to set this aside and we're going to go cook our noodles. All right, so the water is boiling in my nice and shallow pan here. I'm just going to drop my already soaked glass noodles in here. It should take about 4 minutes to get nice and perfectly al dente. Noodles are done. We're just going to give them a rinse in some cold water to stop the cooking process. Okay. All right, so we've got a large big bowl here, and I'm going to remove all the stir-fried vegetables that we made. Now we're just going to add our noodles. Then we're just going to add a little bit of flavor. To this, I'm going to add just a tiny bit of soy sauce. We don't want this to be a very wet noodle dish because we're going to be stuffing them into our pancakes. So I'm just going to add a tablespoon of soy sauce here. I'm also going to add about half a tablespoon of maple syrup. You could also just use brown sugar, regular sugar, whatever sweetener you like. I just happen to like maple syrup. There we go. And then finally, we are going to add just a touch more sesame oil to this. I'm going to add about half a tablespoon. We're just going to give this a good mix here. Now, as I mentioned earlier, in order to make our stuffing situation a lot easier, we're going to take some scissors, some kitchen shears, and I'm just going to go ahead and snip up the noodles so they're more like bite size instead of really long and dangly. I remember when I used to add these glass noodles, they're called tangmyeon in Korean, to my egg rolls and my dumplings. My mom would grumble, "Ugh, it's gonna be so hard to wrap them," because the noodles would always be dangling out of the edges. So I'm just gonna get a little bit of a head start on that by chopping up the noodles into bite-sized pieces. I'm just gonna give this a taste. You do wanna taste anything that you're gonna put into your stuffed pancake because you wanna make sure that stuff is something good, right? So I'm just gonna give it a taste, make sure it doesn't need any additional seasoning or something. Oh, that tastes perfect. Oh, we're on our way. All right. So now that we've got our stuffing all done, we're just gonna wait for our dough to continue proofing so that we can make our stuffed pancakes. All right, so our dough has been sitting in a nice cozy spot for about an hour. Let's check to see if it has risen. Oh yeah. It has doubled in size. If you guys can remember, it was like this scraggly mess at the very bottom of our bowl, and now it's all the way up to the middle of our bowl. What I'm gonna do is I'm just going to punch it down. In order to avoid getting my hand stuck again, I'm actually going to just use this rice paddle. There we go. Just fold it in on itself. And now we're gonna let it sit again for another half hour in the same spot. I'm gonna cover it here with my used plastic bag. And I'll see you in about half an hour. All right, so we have given it a second proof and our dough has risen. It has risen. And as you can see, it is a very scraggly, ugly dough. This is not the kind of dough that is going to make a beautiful baguette, okay? But it is going to make the perfect hotteok. Now, in dealing with this dough, because it is so sticky and scraggly, I am going to use a little bit of vegetable oil to make sure that my hands stay nice and slick as we stuff these babies before we add them into our oil. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take about the size of my palm, just like that. And then I'm going to stretch it out so that it's pretty large and that it's kind of thin. Now it's really covering almost my entire hand. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take that filling that we made, the japchae, we're just gonna add that into the center here. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna pinch everything around until everything is covered, just like this. We've got a nice little ball here, and we're gonna add that to our oil. There we go. And then I've got one of these stampy things, and I'm just gonna press it down like that. Okay, so we can tell that it's nice and brown on the bottom, so I'm just gonna flip it now. All right, so this one has been sitting and cooling for about 5 minutes. It's good enough for me to touch. Let's cut it open. Oh, this one might be the best one. Oh, this one's the best one. That is really good. It's like super doughy. And then you've got the japchae coming out of it. It's really good. Neiman, come over here and try these.
Ooh, hi Joanne.
Hi Neiman.
I'm so excited to try this. It looks beautiful. It's like donut. Oh my goodness.
It's donut with japchae on the inside.
It's like savory donut.
That's really good.
Oh my god, I like this one a lot.
Well, there you have it, guys. Savory hotteok or savory donut. This we made with japchae on the inside. I hope I would do my father proud. Unfortunately, he's in Chicago, I'm in California, so he can't taste these. But at least they passed the Neiman test. That concludes installment 1 of our Korean street food series. Stay tuned, there'll be a lot more Korean street food in your future, but only if you subscribe. And make sure to also like and comment on this video with what you want to see next. All right? All right, till next week. I'll see you then.
Bye.
Bye.